that's where I got the bug. Obviously, in New World, it's an amazing orchestral training program, but they also really encourage the musicians to get out in front of the audience, connect with the audience in unique ways, whether it's, programs where the musicians are fully programming and running the recitals and getting them to talk and connect with the audience in a unique way, as well as community engagement and teaching as teaching artists in schools and community centers.
When I saw that today's guest was putting out his third album, I just had to get him back on the show to talk about it. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are talking today with LA Phil, Los Angeles Philharmonic bassist Jory Herman. And I was looking back in the archives, and I think the last time I talked to Jory was 2016. This 400 podcast episodes ago, which is crazy. And we talked about his two solo albums he put out before his Bach album and his album Life. This one is focused on narration and bass, and it features on many tracks actress and narrator Cloie Wyatt Taylor. Really cool album. We talk about the various tracks and how this album came into existence. And I couldn't resist asking a little bit about Jory's audition for the LA Phil. When I talked to him last, he was in the San Diego Symphony. In addition to balancing being a dad and playing in the San Diego Symphony and all his other projects, he somehow managed to prepare and successfully win an audition for the LA Phil, which is very cool. So all that and more. Quick shout out to our sponsors, D'Addario Strings, Steve Swan String Bass, Upton Bass, Colstein Music, A440 Violin Shop, The Bass Violin Shop, Encoda, and Modacity. You'll also be hearing a few excerpts from this album, which is very cool. So glad that this is getting out there. And here we go with our round two conversation with Jory Herman. Is this your second full season with LA Phil, or is this your third?
That's starting my third, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've been here full 2.5 years. We're in it. This past year has been crazy with all the centennial events for the LA Phil. Actually, this past week was the official 100th birthday for the Phil. I mean, everyone's saying, oh, we look pretty good for being 100 years old. So. But yeah, it was a crazy whirlwind of a week. We had 4 different full-length programs. They invited the 3 past music directors, Zubin Mehta, Esa-Pekka Salonen, and of course, Gustavo Dudamel. And they actually commissioned one piece by Daniel Bjarnason for all 3 conductors on stage at the same time, split into, one big orchestra split into 3 smaller orchestras. And so they're all, it was very interesting metaphor for kind of the, this orchestra has been created and, developed by all 3 of them at the same time. So it was a very cool event, big gala festivities. And that was that. And that's 100 years.
Wow.
On to the next.
On to the next 100 years.
Yep.
Well, it's kind of cool. Esa-Pekka, now is headed here up north to San Francisco. And it was cool to see his first concert with SF Symphony since they named him music director. Yeah.
He's every time he conducts SNFL, it's such a great, fun, just energetic, very, very amazing experience with him. So I know he'll do great things up there.
Yeah, everybody's excited, and I love it's fun to see the marketing and the branding that the symphony is doing. You know, they've got Esa-Pekka, and right behind him is Salesforce Tower, so it's like new San Francisco, new conductor, new this, new that, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, the whole past year was, just leading up to this past week. So about a year ago, they started with the Celebrate LA Day, where they had events at the Hollywood Bowl, downtown at Disney Hall, and then they actually closed off the 8 miles in between all of the streets, and they had a Ciclavia event. So it was a big community day. You can bring down your bikes and walk and run around, and they had musical events all lining the street, throughout the day. And then, of course, the big festivities in the evening with, Katy Perry fireworks, grand finale, and the whole shebang. So that was about a year ago. And that's actually kind of to segue into kind of talking about the album. That's the first time that we kind of started working on this narration and music concept. We put together a family event, and I met Cloie Wyatt Taylor, and she was an amazing actress and narrator. And we put together this program kind of based on children's stories and intertwining music and doing what we do musically. Michelle sang on violin, joined me on bass. So we arranged some duets and to intertwine into the stories. So we kind of had a program ready to go, and that kind of started that conversation, and then developed into, intertwining other ideas. Obviously, Failing and B.B. Wolf are the mainstays of the bass repertoire. So it kind of naturally and organically kind of evolved from that experience about a year ago.
Oh, it's very fun. I listened to all of it on Friday. Went through and checked out all the tracks. And yeah, you get the Mingus, that like Arco bass. What was that Mingus? It's live in the Underworld, right?
Yeah, Mingus Live in the Underworld. It's by Frank Proto.
Okay,
and,
that's right.
The text is written by John Chenault. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, hopefully. But it's not a kid's album, but there's a few kids' tunes on it. And it's kind of offset by these more adults, kind of the When the Old Man Smokes was a piece written by a friend, David Kirkland Garner, in 2009. He wrote it for me, and I've performed it several times, but never had the chance. And I really wanted to record it and send it back to him and have, give him a nice version to have. So that was another reason to put all of this together, is to make sure I can get a good recording for David. So yeah, it kind of all came together. There's kind of half and half, kind of kids, fun tunes, and then half kind of more adults, artistic, poetic, if you will, pieces. So.
Well, I love, you've always been into the community engagement aspect of music. I remember talking a few years ago. You know what? I was looking, I've put out, I can't believe, because I feel like I don't think we've had a chance to spend any time in person yet. Have we?
No, we haven't.
Okay, one of these days. I was in LA like 5 days ago, but I was really in Pomona, and I was just an in and out trip. But I'm going to spend a little more time. It'd be great to obviously see a concert and just hang out. But I was looking, I've put out 400 podcasts.
That's amazing.
since we chatted.
That's
but I love,
I don't know how you do it.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. But I keep all this stuff in Evernote. So I was going back and I was like reading through it. I was just thinking like, man, you've been into that community engagement aspect of music for years, going back to New World, right? Is that where you kind of got that spark?
Yeah, that's where I got the bug. Obviously, in New World, it's an amazing orchestral training program, but they also really encourage the musicians to get out in front of the audience, connect with the audience in unique ways, whether it's, programs where the musicians are fully programming and running the recitals and getting them to talk and connect with the audience in a unique way, as well as community engagement and teaching as teaching artists in schools and community centers. So yeah, that's where I got the bug, and continued it ever since. When I got to San Diego, that was a big part of our tenure as well, going out into the community and doing various projects, and continue doing that. And I've just always been enjoyed it. I mean, what do we do as musicians if there's not a community? We're just practicing in a room, right? So we have to engage with the community, learn who we're performing for, and it's definitely more fun for all involved if you know who you're performing for. You're able to program for them, if you know what they like, if you know how to guide them through amazing music, and to really kind of adjust each experience depending where you're playing, who you're playing for, and just connect with the audience in a really profound way. I think that's one of the most important things that we do as musicians. It's not enough just to put together a recital, check it off the list, done, performed it. Yes, that was great, lovely. But to go that extra step and really find out who you're playing for is something to be said. And it takes work. It's that in and of itself probably takes practice too. As much as we do behind the scenes, we have to kind of practice connecting with the audience too. So it's obviously still a work in progress, and I enjoy it, and I'm also want to work and get better at it too.
This episode is brought to you by Steve Swan String Bass, and Steve has been researching top regraduation for many years. Here's Steve on the topic.
I found some old diagrammed bass tops in an old violin making book that had violins, violas, cellos, and only 4 basses from kind of the classic period, the early 1800s. And I took a pattern of kind of a topographical map of thicker in the center under the bridge, and then the thinnest is right near the edges, just before it flares out and gets strong again. And I put in some measurements that I thought would work, and we use that as a general pattern for top regraduation, and it really works.
You would be amazed how well this technique works. I've been impressed time and time again at how immediately a bass speaks after coming from Steve's shop, and how resonant and beautiful and open the sound is. Learn more at steveswanstringbass.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast, Steve.
I'm Jory Herman, and I'm one of the newest members of the Los Angeles Philharmonic double bass section. Last year I began using the Diodario Kaplan strings and really love how they sound and what they can do. As a young bassist, my first memories of playing the instrument were actually on the Diodario Helicore strings, so you could say that I've been using Diodario products since about 1994. Throughout college and my early professional life, I tried many different types and gauges of strings, and even experimented with mixing and matching from different sets. I would put 3 strings from one set with the lowest string from another, or maybe just change out the top string or do half and half, but never was really fully committed to the entire set from a single brand. Kaplan strings, however, do everything that you need them to. They have a crisp articulation while remaining warm and resonant from top to bottom across all strings. They have an immediate and clear response without maxing out in the loudest section of the music, all while still being delicate and singing in the softest sections of the music. All around, they're an incredible set of strings for the orchestra bass section.
This episode is brought to you by the Bass Violin Shop, which opened in 2001 as a small double bass workshop in Greensboro, North Carolina. Today, they're staffed by 3 full-time, highly skilled bass luthiers, and they specialize in double bass sales, rentals, setup, restoration, and repair. For nearly 20 years, they have satisfied thousands of clients by offering quality instruments, knowledgeable service, reliable repairs, and superior restorations at affordable prices. They offer high-quality, custom ebony C extensions with 2 different chromatic latch options, handmade ebony latches with adjustable aluminum mounts by New Harmony Music, or adjustable brass latches by Rob Angelotti. Give the Bass Violin Shop a call to discuss your extension needs. For more information and current inventory, visit their website at bassviolinshop.com, and be sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram. It's incredibly cool. It's fun. And I love it. So this is your third, I don't know how you do all this stuff, because this is your third solo album, right? You put out the Bach album, you put out Life, right? Like 2015, 26,
yes.
Somewhere around there? Okay, yes. Great. And I remember chatting with you a few years ago and just thinking like, man, what a rich artistic life Jory has, with the orchestra and then all this. And then you're like winning LA Phil auditions in the middle of all of that. Like, it's incredible.
And don't forget about the family stuff. So I have two daughters.
Right.
Yeah, my older one is 4 years old, and younger daughter's about to turn 1 year old. So we stay busy around here, but it's a labor of love doing the recording. It's something I enjoy, kind of putting together these packages and thinking what will go well together, and also the aspect of kind of producing it and all of the various artistic things you have to think about. It's a different side of what we do as orchestral bassists. We're so focused in the moment in terms of the playing the bass part and being with a section and with the orchestra and kind of supporting from below. Whereas, once you kind of step out of the box and start thinking about an album and you're in the limelight and you're making all the calls, it's a different kind of hat that you have to wear. So I enjoy doing that. But yeah, it's definitely a labor of love. It's it's a lot of work, and but yeah, I'm glad I was able to put this one together. I think it has a lot to offer for the bass community, especially with such the mainstays of BB Wolf and Failing, and Mingus. Some of the ones that are just so enjoyable to perform, as well as for the audience. Every time I've performed it, the audience I've talked to after, they just are mind blown about everything that the bass has to offer. So it's cool to see that reaction in people. Like, I've never heard the bass that way. I didn't know you could do that in the bass. So it's great to be able to change people's perceptions.
Well, I love the way you get into the BB Wolf too. It's a very fun sort of intro to that. And then, of course, like Failing, having played that many times, I went to the end and I was like, how is Jory going to get out of what's written and into the improvised section? And it's things that make people reconceive what the bass is, the role of the bass. And I just love the idea of bass and narration. I got to ask, so obviously, the playing part you're doing, the recording part you're doing, the editing you're doing, what percentage of the stuff after you get the tracks laid down are you doing yourself?
So I was the producer. I coordinated with Chris Hobson, who was the recording engineer for the Bach album that I released. And so he's actually doing all of the editing, and he's doing all of the takes and splicing and all. I mean, he's a wizard at that. It would take me years to try to edit something like that with all of the cuts and just setting the levels just like getting the microphone placement right. Just like, it's important to hire someone that can do that well. So big shout out to Chris Hobson. And then I listen to the takes afterwards and kind of decide which one is where the best vibe is and where, the cuts need to be made. So kind of make those decisions. And then, if we need to do something over again, or if we need to remix something, kind of mix all the levels. So to kind of just create the general mood of the album, and also make the decisions of which the track order, what is the design of the CD, what is it going to look like, what is it going to feel like, what is it going to sound like, so all of that. But yeah, Chris was the other half of the big project. He spent the most time mastering and taking care of the audio of it. And it was a stressful 2 days in the studio. We actually went down to San Diego. There's a great little studio in there, Rarefied Studios. And I don't normally wouldn't have thought about recording in a studio, except for a project like this, which is so narration heavy. So we made sure we had some really good mics on the vocals, because it almost is like an audiobook. There's so much narration that it's like almost the music is the backup, the narration and the story is the through line. So we wanted to focus really on that. And so that really required us to be in a studio. And we were able to set up the vocal booth separately. It's an isolation booth, and then have the music in the other big room. So we were able to track everything at the same time. So we get the energy of a live performance, but have the isolation between the two, voice and the music separately. So that was a good thing. And funny story, actually, for Failing, because everything else was so narration, and we wanted to make sure we get the isolation of the voice right. We tracked Failing originally separately. So I actually did the text and everything in the isolation booth, which is totally cheating, but it was like we had to make the decision. Do we make everything sound exactly the same and have this through line of the narration and use the exact same mics for the voice throughout the whole thing? And so we went with that as the first choice because we were set up to do it, and performing it, on bass separately. So it didn't have the same vibe. And oddly enough, I failed at recording failing for the first time. So we actually had to go back and redo the entire thing because it didn't quite have the same energy as if you're performing failing and in the same room, the same performer narrating at the same time as playing. So we ended up having to kind of jerry rig this big contraption where the mic was right in front of my face and this kind of isolation sort of box was right in front of my face so I could kind of peek out and see the music, and then the mics to capture the bass sound was right underneath that, so there wouldn't be much bleed between the two mics, so they can get a good capture of each one individually. It looked like I was astronaut or some like a big Halloween costume, but yeah, it's just a big old box in front of my face, bass sound, and then that was the way to do it, and we got that right the second time after a good few hours wasted the first way. So
I hope you get some photos of that. That's got to be.
I did actually. It looks good.
Okay. Buying an instrument or bow is a major decision, especially the first time a student's looking for an instrument. Here's A440 Violin Shop's Michael Spadero on what he advises.
We usually start with an approximate price range, and we'll show them anything within that price range, and then to give them a little bit of context, I'll often show them instruments that are more or less expensive than that. But I say to play as many instruments or bows as possible before you buy.
Whether you're looking for a new instrument or a new bow or that next step in your journey, A440 Violin Shop has got you covered. Look for them online at a440violinshop.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. Upton Bass has an interesting philosophy in terms of selling basses to people. Here's Eric of Upton on the topic.
I don't want to sell you one bass. I want to sell you like four. When you're in high school or college or just starting out, or you just 30 years been playing double bass or electric bass, and now you're on your first double bass. You're starting off with a $2,500 laminate, and then I want you to outgrow it. I want you to come back and say, now I'm ready for the hybrid. Or now I'm ready for the solid wood bass.
Wherever you are on that trajectory, Upton has a bass to meet your needs. Learn more at uptonbass.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. Samuel Kolstein, who founded Kolstein & Sons back 70 years ago at this point, Sam was largely self-taught. Here's Barry Kolstein about how his father got into the business.
It was mainly self-taught, but I will pay homage to people that need to be paid homage. He did study a bit with Al Eisenstein, who was a great repairman in Manhattan. He was considered one of the top, and Al was very gracious. He allowed my father to sit at his side, watch him work, but a lot of it was self-taught. My father was very ingenious person. He really would look at a problem and figure out 5 ways of doing it, and then choose the right way always.
Ever since those early years, Kolstein & Sons has been working to solve problems for bass players, provide them with ever better instruments and new opportunities in terms of travel basses and cases and all sorts of things that we need as bass players. Thank you, Barry, and thank you, Kolstein, for everything that you do and for sponsoring the podcast. Well, I was curious about that, and also, so you got some pieces that we know, and then you got these pieces that are more geared toward children, and you and the violinist are playing back and forth and playing some tunes we know for some of these. Like, how did those pieces, like Giraffes Can't Dance, or even the Halloween Story, like how did those come together? Was that like from improvisation, or were you testing things out live, or what was the genesis of some of those other pieces?
Yeah, so we've performed some of the other pieces, like I said, at the Celebrate LA festivities. So we were able to kind of develop the pieces, and I arranged some of the music, pulled from Mozart and Handel and various kind of energetic pieces to highlight some of the ideas that are represented in these books and children's stories. And obviously the through line for all of the children's stories is it's all based on the music. So, the first one, Mole Music by David McPhail. It's a cute story written in 1999, and actually the 20th anniversary of that book. So we were able to intertwine how the mole starts out. He's excited to play violin, and he tries his very first note, and it was, and the story develops from there into he's performing for, the world. And so it's cute little things like that. And obviously with two children that, reading and story time and bedtime is a really important part of my day. So I've really enjoyed thinking about those sort of ideas and sounds and how to tell a story like that. So it was important for me to include some of these things that we share as a family too. So it's a little selfish, but also we wanted to share it too. One note about The Giraffes Can't Dance: we recorded it, and unfortunately we were not able to get the rights from the publisher. They nixed it. So it will be deleted, thrown in the trash can, and everyone should write an email saying, I heard the LA Phil bassist was recording this and you denied it, so I am grumpy. Boo-hoo. Please let him release it so we can hear it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah, they just said, we are not interested in allowing the rights for this, so please cease and desist. And thus I have.
Well, but you got a lot of good material regardless. And I love you passed along to me these flashcards that you put together, like just for helping people to explore. Like, talk to me about that. What are you doing there?
Oh, so for the Halloween story, that was it was very, I don't know, off the cuff recording that we did. I threw together this story about Halloween and trick-or-treaters, and it utilizes all the kind of creepy, scary bass sounds that you can make. And actually, a few years ago, I had a student, and it was around Halloween, and we were kind of starting our lesson. I was like, let's do something fun today, and just kind of went through and got a laundry list of all the various sounds you can make. The bow slowly scraping on the string, so it sounds like a door creaking, or squeaks, or mouse scampering across the floor, or the seagull sound as you do artificial harmonics going up the string. I mean, all of the great sound effects, and it doesn't have to be Halloween, but it could be any story. So in that day, I kind of developed, with my student, little bits of narration to go along. And so you can use either flashcards, you can write the story, you can use whatever notation you need. The notation isn't important. It's getting the sounds and stuff. So that could be used, any age. So I thought that was kind of a fun thing. And we ended up just literally throwing it together in the studio. We had a little extra time and said, you want to do this? And we literally did 2 takes of it. And I think it came together really well. It was just, I can't listen to the end of the Halloween story that Cloie's narrating. So we did actually 2 versions, one where I'm narrating and one where Cloie's narrating, just to have 2 different ones. And I can't listen to the end of the Cloie's version without, I get shivers, like something about how the bass sound interacts with her voice, kind of whispering, and just gets that really creepy. Like I'm getting literally goosebumps as I'm thinking about that sound. So check it out. It's a fun one. But yeah, it came together so just impromptu, very last second, and it was total fun to do it.
It's a great idea I love that Halloween story and just the album in general and the idea behind it, and narration and bass. That's something near and dear to my heart. And it's cool. I'm a fan of what you do. Been a fan for ever since we first chatted for the podcast, and this is coming out. You're going to put it out early December.
That's my plan. We're about to go on tour with a Phil through Mexico City, London, New York, Boston. So it's still in the design phase of getting the album put together. So if that can get all done and looks peachy, and I can send it to the printers and get it all put together. My idea is to get it early December, is to release it. So, but barring all the craziness with touring and family, it's we'll see. TBA.
Okay. Well, when you're hearing this podcast, the album's out.
Exactly.
So that's okay. Cool. I will link up to that. I'd love to. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but let me ask you one. Okay, how on earth? Slightly different topic, but how on earth does someone doing what you do, young child, right?
2 daughters.
Two, but back in 2017, one. Okay, how on earth does? I remember David Allen Moore a few years ago said you should really talk to people about like how once you get to a certain point, and then you get to like the next step. Like something like the LA Phil. Like how do you win a job while you're holding down another job? And you were holding down like 5 jobs, like, dad, full-time in San Diego, Art of Violin, all this outreach program. So what on earth, how do you incorporate the type of practicing you need to do to win an audition like the LA Phil? How did you incorporate that into this suite of activities that you have?
Well, it definitely takes a village. I mean, huge shout out to my wife, Selena. Like in those months beforehand, obviously she had to go the extra mile to make sure everything was taken care of around the house. So that's, number one period is making sure that the support is there. And, it goes in flux. That next month after that audition, I made sure I stepped up and no, it's your turn to take time off. So, but yeah, it's in terms of practicing and making sure stuff gets taken care of. It's, time management. I've, Google calendars and, tasks and Google Keep. I use all of that and make sure I really clearly prioritize for myself what's going on, book things in the calendar, even down to like exercising. If I have that 30-minute block, I need to put it in the calendar to make sure it gets done. And then in terms of practicing, I don't have the luxury of spending, 4 hours like I did in college to, just hold myself into a practice room and do what I need to do. The great thing about, doing all of these projects is that I'm already in shape. If you're performing, regularly with an orchestra, you're doing side recitals, you're doing community engagement recitals. I had already released the Bach album, so I'm already in shape. I'm doing the work. I'm there. It's just a matter of taking the list for each specific audition and honing the specific, sounds and skills and performance, practicing, performing and auditioning. Mock auditions are super important. I did a good bit of recording and kind of putting myself in the mindset of auditioning, so much so like I would even go to I found a screenshot or a photo online of the hall. I actually put it on my monitor, so anytime I picked up the laptop, I would kind of see that in the background. Or I actually did a few things where I would record and put on headphones and put the mic across the room so I can hear my sound across the room, and did some mock auditions that way for friends and family, and just kind of being creative with how I put myself on that day for the audition, and to kind of really make sure the visualization aspect is there for auditioning, because it's, so much of it is mental as well as physical. So as long as I had the benefit of doing the job, doing the physical stuff, I'm there, in terms of musically, and then adding that next, element of all the mental and kind of preparation. So, and, in a way, just having that extra, kind of pressure to make sure I take care of, anything I needed to take care of in my practice session. It was, in a way, kind of, helped me, because there's no time for messing around. Like, you got to get your stuff done or it's not getting done. And at that point, you're just like, okay, this is me. I'm a performer. This is what I got. And it's, nothing earth shattering is going to change, between, now and the audition, whether it's, 2 months out, a month out, this is who I am as a performer. And it's depending what the committee is listening for that day, and depending how I do that day, there's so much that's out of your control. And, you can't think about that stuff. You just have to think about what you can control. And that's everything I just kind of talked about. So.
Wow. It reminds me I remember talking with Jeff Turner several years ago about how many people he saw that would do well at the Pittsburgh Symphony when he was principal bass there, that had just played a recital that were involved just being kind of a complete artist outside of just that practice room. And I'm always fascinated by how that contributes. Obviously, you got to put in the work and do the work and get creative and schedule that time. And time is precious, ever more precious the older you get. But I do think that's interesting. Like, talk about being in shape. I mean, doing that Bach album, doing your album Life, and just, it's, you strike me as a creatively pretty inspired person. I'm sure that's got to carry through in every including auditioning.
Yeah, you have to work, even if it's the smallest little excerpt in a piece. You have to bring the same sort of creativity and just openness to developing a phrase, just as you would, a larger musical piece, solo or whatever. So everything that we do needs to have that sort of thoughtful creation to it.
And the teardrops come a-trickling down his cheeks, a silver flow. Smoke, or memories, you wonder, but you never ask him. No. For there's something almost sacred to the other family folks in those moods of silent dreaming when the old man smokes. Perhaps he sits there dreaming of...
Jory, thank you so much for chatting. Folks, check out this new album and everything that he is up to at his website, joryherman.com. We've got that linked up in the show notes. And let's have it not be 400 episodes before we chat again. What a cool career. What a cool album. I just learned so much and have such a good time doing these podcasts. So thank you for listening. I'm in Australia, or getting back, I think, from Australia right now. I'm recording these before going. So expect to hear a whole bunch of content from the Melbourne Bass Day and my travels to Sydney and Melbourne. And I just thank you in the community for following along. That's why I'm making trips to Australia, to talk to people and to bring them onto the podcast like that. Thank you to the sponsors for making it happen financially. It's not cheap. And if you want to reach out and say hi or suggest a guest or anything like that, feedback@contrabassconversations.com is the email, and I love hearing from people. Contrabass Conversations is produced by Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Trevor Jones, and Mitch Mooring. And Mitch makes beautiful basses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Learn more at mitchmooring.com. Thank you also to Krista Copper for cataloging and archiving everything we talk about in this podcast. Appreciate it so much. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.